Well, I think the best way to answer that question is to provide some historical context. The Terrorism Act 2000 consolidated precursor legislation that was pioneered in the north of Ireland to deal with the specific problem of Irish Republican groups seeking the unification of Ireland, right? So a sort of anti-colonial struggle, not that dissimilar in some ways to what's going on in Palestine. And so the British state pioneered this technique under precursor legislation of making certain organisations illegal, and what that meant was that if you were a member of such an organisation, it was a crime and you went to prison for a long time, right? So you think about a lot of the IRA and INLA and other members, they were serving sentences for the crime of membership of a proscribed organisation. And then obviously Tony Blair's government comes along, wins an election in 1997, passes the Human Rights Act in 1998, and then the Terrorism Act in 2000. So the 2000 Act is this consolidation of the technique pioneered in the north of Ireland, and it makes it international. So any group, not just groups operating within the territory of the so-called United Kingdom, can find itself on that list. And it's not just that it makes it very difficult to be a member of such an organisation because you're at risk of going to prison just for the fact of being a member. It's also that a whole host of other specifically criminal offences kick in once an organisation is added to that list, right? You understand the Secretary of State has the power to add a group to that list.
Yep.
And so some of those offences I've already touched on, right? Membership, organising a meeting, all that kind of stuff. But it's also the case that these Section 12 offences kick in. So Section 12 is all about expressing support for a proscribed organisation or being reckless as to whether or not someone thinks that you were inviting support for a proscribed organisation. So that's the context. The Terrorism Act 2000 is designed to make it very, very difficult for people to meet with, to join, and even to talk about certain organisations. And in that regard, it's a deliberate attempt to suppress people's freedom to talk openly about it.
That's what I wanted to touch on quickly, because, I mean, when we think about Hamas as a structure, both the military and the political wing, we're here in the UK right now, we face zero threat. And so really it's almost difficult to understand why that makes such a big difference to us. But if you want to carry on with that on the topic of freedom of expression and exactly what it aims to achieve in that sense.
Yeah, we can talk about freedom of expression, but I think this point about the lack of a threat to Britain is really crucial, because that formed part of the logic for Priti Patel, right? Priti Patel was the Secretary of State for the Home Department who made the decision to add the political wing. And part of the rationale was her suggestion that it was somehow that it would cause distress to Jewish people in Britain, and that was why she was adding the political wing. And it's this classic sort of absurd black is white, up is down, and the British state, which is currently participating in a genocide against Palestinians, right? So the British state poses this really serious mortal threat to Palestinians, as a matter of fact, right? Selling them arms and providing staunch diplomatic support to its little loyal Jewish Ulster, as Ronald Storrs once described the idea of an Israeli state. So Britain is actually attacking Palestinians, but we're to believe that the reverse is true, that somehow Palestinians are a threat to Britain, right? Yeah. And it's completely absurd, right? The organisation I represent have made it clear that they are a national liberation struggle and that they confine their operations to the territory of historic Palestine. They've never executed any operations in Britain. They have no intention of doing that. And yet part of the rationale for this decision is apparently that British people won't be safe unless this designation stands. That's obvious nonsense. And it's like I've said, it's not just the British state that's engaged in this genocide. It's also the case, of course, we had that news that broke a while ago of about a couple of months ago now, 10 British people who went to serve in the Zionist military who stand accused of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. So again, we have this example of where the reverse is actually true. It's the case that Britain poses a really mortal threat to Palestinians.
The surveillance flights as well, the intelligent flights over Gaza.
And the hundreds of years of British government support for the idea of creating a Jewish ethno-state, this bizarre British fantasy that the British Empire wanted a Jewish colony in Palestine. And so it's completely absurd. And part of what we're trying to get across in this application is that things, as usual, as so often with the British Empire, they've got things the wrong way around.